Dear friend, let me ask you something. Have you ever wandered past a neighbor's yard and spotted a hydrangea so full of blossoms it looked like it belonged in a painting, and then gone home to your own plant, only to find it limp, sparse, and far less impressive? I know that feeling. Hydrangeas are one of those flowers that seem to promise effortless beauty, yet so many gardeners, myself included, have learned that they don't thrive by accident. Behind those huge, colorful clusters is not luck, but a gardener who avoided a few very common mistakes. Continue. The truth is, thousands of gardeners across the country repeat the same missteps every year without realizing it. The result: frustration, wasted money, and worst of all, the disappointment of missing out on the joy these plants can bring. I once stood in my own backyard looking at two shrubs planted at the same time. One flourished with blooms that seemed to smile at the sun, while the other struggled along with yellowing leaves and not a single flower. The difference came down to care, not chance. Continue. The good news, and I really want you to hold on to this, is that hydrangeas are forgiving. Once you understand what not to do, they reward you with resilience and renewal. And that's why we're here today. I'm going to share 5 costly mistakes you must avoid, along with some lessons from my own garden. Together, we'll transform frustration into flourishing and disappointment into delight. By the end of this conversation, you'll see that you don't need to be young or wealthy to grow beauty. You just need patience, observation, and the willingness to give your hydrangeas the thoughtful care they deserve. If you've ever felt like your hydrangeas are stubborn plants that simply refuse to cooperate, chances are the real issue lies underground or just overhead. Soil and sunlight may not be as flashy as fertilizer bags or pruning shears, but they are the quiet foundation that makes or breaks your hydrangeas. Think of it like building a home. If the ground isn't stable and the light isn't just right, no amount of decorating will make the house stand strong. Hydrangeas are no different. Continue. The roots of these shrubs crave soil that feels like a well-wrung sponge, moist but not drowning. Heavy clay suffocates them, while sandy soil leaves them parched. I learned this firsthand in my early gardening days. I planted a hydrangea in a patch of compacted clay, not realizing water pooled there after every rain. Within weeks, the poor plant's leaves wilted like damp paper, and the blooms I dreamed of never arrived. It wasn't until I dug it up, mixed in compost and leaf mold, and gave those roots a looser, richer home that the plant began to breathe again. Continue. And then there's the question of light. Hydrangeas thrive best in that sweet middle ground morning sun to wake them gently, followed by afternoon shade to shield them from the fiercest rays. Too much blazing sun leaves them scorched and gasping, while deep shade gives you plenty of leaves but not a single flower to show for your efforts. I once tucked a hydrangea in a sunny corner, believing the more sun the better. Instead, its leaves crisped, at the edges curling like old letters left too close to the fire. Only when I relocated it to a shadier spot did it finally recover, almost as though it was sighing in relief. Continue. The lesson here is simple but powerful. Don't guess. Watch how the sun travels across your yard throughout the day and test your soil before planting. A small investment of observation and preparation saves years of struggle. Hydrangeas may seem particular, but when given that balanced foundation of nourishing soil and dappled light, they reward you generously. And in many ways, they remind us of ourselves. We don't thrive under extremes, but in environments where we feel supported and balanced, we blossom. Take the time to set your hydrangeas up for success and they'll thank you with blooms that make every passerby pause in admiration. Watering seems like the simplest task in gardening. Turn on the hose, sprinkle a bit, and call it done. But with hydrangeas, this easy step is where many gardeners quietly lose the battle. These plants don't just want water, they want it delivered in a very particular way. Shallow watering, the kind where the surface looks wet but the roots stay thirsty, is one of the biggest hidden culprits behind weak, drooping hydrangeas. I'll never forget when I treated my first hydrangeas like my lawn. Each morning, I gave them a quick spray, satisfied when the soil darkened. They looked fine at first, but within weeks, their leaves sagged every hot afternoon as if crying out for help. What I hadn't realized was that shallow watering was training the roots to stay near the soil surface. Those fragile roots couldn't handle heat or drought. It wasn't until I slowed down, allowing the water to seep deeply into the earth, that the transformation happened. Suddenly, the plants stood tall, their leaves stayed lush, and the blooms lasted longer than I'd imagined. Continue. Hydrangeas prefer fewer, deeper drinks instead of daily sprinkles. 2 or 3 thorough waterings a week are far better than little sips each day. A soaker hose or drip irrigation is perfect, quietly feeding the roots without splashing the leaves. And there's another secret weapon, mulch. A soft blanket of shredded leaves, bark, or compost around the base locks and moisture keeps the soil cool and means you don't have to water as often. Just remember to leave a little breathing space at the crown so the plant doesn't rot. Continue. What I've come to love about this method is the rhythm it creates. Deep watering isn't just better for the hydrangeas, it slows me down too. Instead of rushing through, I find myself pausing, listening to the water soaking in, noticing how the air feels on that particular morning. Gardening becomes less about chores and more about connection. And isn't that true in life as well? Shallow attention gives short-lived results, but when we pour ourselves fully into what matters, whether that's a friendship, a hobby, or even a hydrangea, the roots grow strong and the rewards last. So next time you water, think deep, not quick. Your hydrangeas and perhaps even your spirit will be stronger for it. Pruning feels like one of those satisfying garden chores, snipping away old stems, shaping the plant, and standing back to admire your neat work. But with hydrangeas, timing is everything, and cutting at the wrong moment can erase a whole season of blooms. The tricky part is that not all hydrangeas grow the same way. Some flower on old wood, the stems that formed last year, while others bloom on new wood, the fresh growth of spring. If you don't know which kind you have, one enthusiastic round of pruning can leave you staring at bare green leaves instead of the blossoms you were hoping for. Continue. I learned this lesson the painful way. Years ago, I had a beloved bigleaf hydrangea, the type with those classic mophead blooms. In early spring, eager to give it a clean shape, I cut it back hard. I thought I was helping it start fresh. That summer, not a single bloom appeared. It was a beautiful green shrub. Yes, but without the flowers, it felt like a song missing its melody. I realized too late that I had trimmed away every single bud that had formed the year before. That mistake cost me an entire season. Continue. Here's the golden rule: if your hydrangea blooms early in summer, chances are it flowers on old wood. Those need pruning immediately after they finish flowering, never in spring. Panicle and smooth hydrangeas, on the other hand, bloom later in the season and grow on new wood. Those can be pruned safely in late winter or early spring, and they'll bounce right back with fresh blooms. The key is knowing your variety before you touch those pruners. A quick check of the plant tag or even a little observation across seasons can save you from disappointment. Continue. The larger lesson is one of patience and awareness. Hydrangeas teach us to pay attention to cycles, to respect that growth takes time, and that sometimes what looks like an old bare branch is actually holding next year's promise. In life, too, we can be tempted to cut back too quickly on projects, on people, even on ourselves, when what's really needed is some time. So before you reach for those pruners, pause, look closely, understand what kind of plant you're tending and what kind of growth it holds. With that awareness, your hydrangeas will reward you with blooms that feel like little miracles of timing. When we think of helping plants grow, fertilizer often feels like the magic answer. After all, if a little food is good, then surely more must be better, right? But with hydrangeas, overfeeding is one of the quietest mistakes gardeners make. These shrubs don't need constant heavy meals. In fact, too much fertilizer, especially nitrogen-rich blends meant for lawns, pushes out leafy growth at the expense of flowers. You end up with a big, healthy-looking bush that offers plenty of green, but not a single bloom to enjoy. Continue. I remember one season when I made this very mistake. I wanted to give my hydrangeas every advantage, so I generously sprinkled fertilizer across the soil every few weeks. The plants grew lush, but when summer came, they stood there bare of blossoms as though mocking my efforts. It wasn't until I switched to a balanced, slow-release fertilizer applied sparingly in spring and once more mid-season that the flowers returned. It was a lesson in restraint. Sometimes less, truly, is more. Continue. Now let's talk about one of the most fascinating quirks of hydrangeas, the way soil pH influences flower color. Big leaf hydrangeas in particular respond like little artists to the chemistry beneath them. Acidic soils, pH below 6, bring out rich blues, while alkaline soils pH above 7 shift blooms toward pink. I once had 2 shrubs planted side by side, identical in every way except for the soil around them. To my surprise, one bloomed sky blue and the other candy pink. The secret was in the soil's chemistry, not the plant itself. Continue. This discovery turned gardening into something playful for me. By adding garden lime, I could coax pink hues. With aluminum sulfate, I could deepen the blues. It didn't happen overnight, but within a season or 2, I could paint my garden with color. It reminded me that gardening isn't just about care. It's also about creativity, about partnering with nature to create beauty in unexpected ways. The real lesson: don't drown your hydrangeas in fertilizer and don't ignore the invisible hand of soil pH. Test adjust gently and embrace the surprises. In doing so, you not only encourage healthy blooms, but also learn how even small changes in the environment can transform the entire character of your garden. When you first bring home a young hydrangea from the nursery, it sits so neatly in its little pot that it feels harmless to tuck it into the ground without much thought. But one of the most costly mistakes happens in that very moment of planting, setting it too deep or too close to its neighbors. Unlike some hardy shrubs that tolerate a bit of neglect, hydrangeas are sensitive about their crown, the place where roots and stems meet. If that crown is buried beneath the soil, moisture collects rot, sets in, and before long, the plant struggles to survive. Continue. I learned this the hard way when I buried a hydrangea just an inch too deep. At first, nothing seemed wrong. By the second season, though, the stems looked weak and the plant never fully leafed out. When I dug it up, the crown was soft and darkened, a sure sign of rot. From then on, I followed the simple but crucial rule: the top of the root ball should sit flush with the ground, not buried beneath it. That tiny detail makes the difference between a plant that languishes and one that thrives. Continue. Spacing is just as important. Hydrangeas look charming when planted close together, but those small shrubs can quickly grow into sprawling beauties. Without enough room, air circulation suffers diseases like mildew creep in, and the plants compete for light and nutrients. I once planted 3 in a tight triangle, eager for an instant full look. For the first year, they were lovely. By year 3, 2 were smothering the third, and all were stressed. I had no choice but to dig them up and give them breathing room. Once spaced properly, they came back strong, as if grateful for the air and space. Continue. And that, I think, mirrors a truth about life. We sometimes crowd ourselves or others, trying to make things look fuller, faster, but growth requires room. Hydrangeas, like people, need space to spread out, breathe, and stretch without being smothered. When you plant at the right depth and give each shrub its rightful space, you aren't just setting them up to survive, you're setting them up to flourish year after year. So the next time you're tucking a hydrangea into the earth, resist the urge to rush or pack them tightly. Think ahead, honor their future size, and let them breathe. Now that we've walked through the 5 big mistakes, let's pause and gather the wisdom into a simple set of habits, a kind of checklist you can carry with you each time you plant water or tend to your hydrangeas. Think of this as your roadmap to avoiding frustration and embracing ease. The truth is, once you set hydrangeas up properly, they're not nearly as fussy as their reputation suggests. In fact, they can become one of the most rewarding and low-maintenance plants in your garden. Continue. First, always start with the soil. Healthy roots are the foundation of healthy blooms. A blend of compost, organic matter, and well-draining texture is like giving your hydrangeas a strong, cozy home. Second, water deeply, but not constantly. Train the roots to reach down by soaking them a few times a week, rather than teasing them with shallow sprinkles. Add a protective layer of mulch, and you'll not only save yourself extra watering chores, but also keep those roots cool and content during summer heat. Continue. Third, give them the right light. Aim for morning sun, followed by gentle afternoon shade. This balance mimics the rhythm of a kind day, bright enough to energize, soft enough to protect. Fourth, when it comes to pruning, knowledge is power. Old wood bloomers need a gentle touch right after flowering, while new wood bloomers can handle a trim in late winter or early spring. Fifth, feed with balance. A slow-release fertilizer in spring and perhaps again in midsummer is plenty. Avoid the temptation to push growth with heavy doses. Continue. And finally, remember spacing and depth. Plant with the crown level to the soil and give each shrub enough breathing room to grow into its mature size. These details might seem small, but they create conditions that allow your hydrangeas to flourish for years without constant intervention. I once followed this checklist with a single shrub on my porch corner, and each summer, without fail, it now greets me with blossoms that feel like a personal reward for patience and care. Continue. The deeper lesson, gardening isn't about perfection or control, it's about partnership. Hydrangeas respond beautifully when we respect their needs, much like people do when given room balance and thoughtful attention. If you carry these best practices with you, your hydrangeas will not just survive, they'll thrive, season after season, becoming a living reminder of how patience and gentle care always bring beauty back into our lives. So here we are, dear friend, at the close of our hydrangea journey. We've talked about soil, water, pruning, fertilizer, and planting depth, not just as gardening lessons, but as reminders of patience, awareness, and balance. Hydrangeas may seem delicate, but when you meet their quiet needs, they respond with a generosity that takes your breath away. They teach us that beauty doesn't appear by accident. It grows slowly with care and often after mistakes have been made and corrected. Continue. I think of the times I nearly gave up when a hydrangea refused to bloom or when rot threatened to undo all my efforts. And yet, with one small change, one act of attention, the plant came back stronger. Isn't that true for us as well? We falter, we get scorched by too much sun or drowned by too much weight. But when given the right environment, we find ways to bloom again. Our gardens mirror our lives, forgiving, resilient, and full of second chances. Continue. As you step out into your yard, I hope you see your hydrangeas with new eyes, not as demanding plants, but as companions that invite you to slow down, notice the light. Listen to the water, soak into the soil, and take pride in creating beauty with your own hands. Remember, you don't need money or youth to have a thriving garden. You only need care, imagination, and the willingness to learn from each season. Continue. Now I'd love to hear from you. Which of these mistakes have you made, or maybe you're still making without realizing it? Was it watering, pruning, or perhaps planting too deeply? Share your stories in the comments. They'll not only help me, but they'll guide other gardeners too. And if this conversation has brought you joy or insight, please consider subscribing for more gentle inspiration each week. Until next time, may your garden bring you peace. May your hydrangeas remind you of life's resilience, and may your days always hold room for beauty. Happy gardening, dear friend.